What about just the existence of bands in 2024 is kind of like an anomalous thing. Everyone, you mentioned before, like 15-year-olds making music on their laptop. Like everyone, or not everyone, but most people I know who are in music are in kind of like, it's either one person or maybe it's a duo, but very rarely do people have like full bands, definitely not ones that have been together for multiple decades, where they have instruments and they have like whole performances. It's we live in a very kind of atomized musical landscape right now, I would say.
We live in a very atomized landscape. Like, you know, I think the death of the living room is just as relevant to the death of the band. You know, the living room used
nowhere to rehearse.
Well, not so much that, but the way that the fire was replaced by the TV, the radio, and then the TV.
Right.
So the TV used to be in the living room where we would all live together, and we would come together and we would watch one screen, and we would talk about what was happening on the screen. We then got our own screens, and what was happening on the screen, we no longer said to the person next to us, we tweeted to 1,000 people.
Right.
So instead of having mum, dad, and the teenager and the 8-year-old all watching the TV at night and fighting over what they want to watch and the remote stuff and the teenager who always changes the channels, now you just have everyone on their own screen. So media consumption has been individualized. Subculture has been individualized and commodified. So when I was growing up, if you wanted to be a goth or a punk, you had to find out where they hung out. You had to physically go there. You had to build up the confidence to talk to them. You had to immerse yourself in a world of cultural and aesthetic references that you didn't know, that you either had to pretend to know and then go to a library. And all of these people's references you knew were authentic because social media didn't exist. You know that they had read this book or been to this show or seen this movie. They hadn't just revised a Wikipedia article on it. Do you know what I mean? So you would immerse yourself.
There was a barrier. There was like a hurdle, a small barrier to entry. Yeah. You had to do certain stuff to join the subculture.
This is the thing. And a process of qualification. And with that process of qualification, you acquired a kind of social identity. You immersed yourself in a community, and you realized that if you bind together with a group, we do this quite a lot now, but in real life, you know, your IRL friends versus your online friends, if you bind together in real life, you can create something bigger than yourself as an individual. That's where the 1975 came from. We should bind together and just make this aesthetic world for ourselves, do you know what I mean? Which meant that when that happened and we went out on tour, we were together, we were a unit, we had a community. Any oppressive Machiavellian forces from the media or whatever had to come up against like the four of us who were willing to like physically fight people. Do you know what I mean? But when social media came along, the idea of being a band isn't incentivized. The idea of being an individual is incentivized.
Sure.
A lot of a band, you'll see, each member will have their own social media. So whether they talk about it or not, they are in competition with each other as individuals.
Exactly.
So that's not healthy for the greater good, right? You shouldn't kind of have that in a band dynamic. Now, I think that the idea of doing that, it also gives yourself kind of like a bit more confidence because there's four of you. Do you know what I mean? And I think that so people don't adhere to subcultures anymore. And also people don't dress like groups of people anymore. I was in New York yesterday and I bumped into Albert Hammond from The Strokes, who's a friend of mine. Now, fucking hell, if I'd have said that 15 years ago, I would have shat my pants. You know what I mean? The last white band, to change how everyone dressed. They changed how an entire generation dressed. No bands have done that since, right? And I think that what people do now is they dress like or they adhere to individuals. a particular Kardashian or whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? The idea of grouping, I don't know what a scene of kids look like, which is why I think like Dazed or Vogue are constantly trying to make everything
scrambling for micro trends.
Or core business core or long hair core or whatever the fuck.
Like if you went to like the lunch table, the proverbial lunch table, like how would you identify, it's a different school, like what your crew is? It's like you look at their t-shirts and their pants or something like that. That's much more difficult now. Like groups of friends don't look like each other or dress like each other.
The best articulation of that concept of how fast a generation's values has changed, because if you look at like the generational values of young, or the cultural customs of young people from the 70s to the 80s to the 90s, there's a bit of a change. But 21 Jump Street does it so well. Because 21 Jump Street is about two guys who I think it's like 2009 were at high school, and 5 years later they come back to high school and Channing Tatum is concerned about what way to wear his bag,
the one strap instead of the two,
and he's met with loads of climate activists who are all queer. And he just fucking hits one of them. Because when I was at school, if you were gay, you got hit. And the whole school's like, bro, what the fuck are you doing?
I got checked into lockers for being too gay.
This is the whole thing. And
that's what it was like when we went to high school.
And that immediately changed. You know what I mean? It's because like, so I don't really know what a scene or a subculture kind of looks like now.
Well, this is not to get like too meta on it, but the generally, like speaking, the disappearance of a mainstream and a counterculture, I would say, is a direct result of what you described before, of like there was this one screen that the whole family was around, or like the whole group of friends or whatever, and they had each their own kind of individual preferences, but they were constrained by there only being one screen.
Exactly.
And so someone who might have preferred to watch the Sci-Fi Channel versus someone who preferred to watch Animal Planet, they had to like negotiate over who got what time, and their options were constrained by having this one TV. And now when everyone has their own individual screen, is not really clear what the mainstream preference is and what the countercultural preference is.
That's exactly
They're all just individualized. And so the counterculture and the mainstream have all kind of like disappeared into just advertising revenue for platforms, period.
Exactly.
And it's not really clear like what kind of oppositional cultural forces, or like how you delineate belonging to a subculture and not belonging to a subculture, because everything is basically just a product of your consumption habits. Like you're clicking into this or clicking into that.
This is the thing, like,
you're not showing up anywhere. You're not like dressing in a certain way or like doing activities with certain people.
I think that's why me and you no, I keep saying me and you as if we're going out, but I think that one of the reasons that we use the word clearnet to describe that space is because the mainstream doesn't make sense. When you've got, you know, what was that acronym? The intellectual dark, you know, that group of intellectuals. When you've got them, or the Daily Wire, or Stephen Crowder, or you know, ContraPoint, or any side of it, when you've got these people amassing more views than CNN and Thingy combined, do you know what I mean? What is the actual mainstream? Now, this idea of kind of what is alternative has plagued me since the beginning. And it's one of the things that I've had to really stick to my guns with, because I think that culture has caught up to the 1975 a lot more than we have kind of adhered to culture, because we were hated when we first came out. And we were hated in particularly by The Enemy and The Fly. Now, I personally hated them back for personal reasons, but part of me now would love an institution that is run by a series of people that, yes, may be self-serious and cringe in regards to how cool they think, but have at least gone through a process of qualification and are there because of their taste, that are that are giving me pieces of art that they think are interesting, as opposed to being fed pieces of art that are doing well.